Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the United States of America, because the most important updates are coming from this territory. And according to the results of the president elections, Donald Trump, the former president of the United States of America, has become the 47th president of the states. This is a very important piece of news. Of course, he will come to his power just in the end of January, but as for now, it doesn't matter. The matter is that not just Trump won the president elections. According to information we have, the Republicans also managed to win the Senate, the majority in Senate, and of course the Republicans managed to take the majority of places in the House of Representatives, which is very important and which makes Donald Trump one of the most powerful presidents since the beginning probably of the United States of America. He will have his majority everywhere, and this will make his hands completely free, and this will allow him to make anything he wants on the territory of the United States of America and of course abroad. And of course he will have enough of power to do anything he likes with Ukraine. He can force Ukrainians and Zelensky to stop the war, or he can start supporting Ukraine with a significant number of money and military assistance that maybe can change the situation on the ground. Anyway, according to his promises, Donald Trump promised to stop the special military operation. So now let's wait what are going to be his next steps. Anyway, Donald Trump is going to take his full power just in the end of January. But until this moment, we're going to still see Joe Biden as the president of the United States of America, Lloyd Austin as the Secretary of Defense, and of course Antony Blinken as the Secretary of State. But after January, most of them would be changed by members of Republicans team, and we will see a completely different picture, which is very bad for Zelensky, because he will have to start everything from the beginning. He will have to start to create connections with the new administration of the states from the beginning, and of course it will take time. And we understand that currently the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, doesn't have this time, because the Russians are pushing, the Russians are advancing, and during the previous 12 hours the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, especially in the South Donetsk direction. Now let's discuss this South Donetsk direction in details. The Russians several days ago, on the 20th of October of 2024, launched a full-scale offensive operation in the South Donetsk direction, and as a result of clashes for the previous 2 weeks, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. The Russians captured several villages like Zolotaya Niva, Shakhtarskaya, Yasnaya Polyana, Maximovka, Novoukrainka, Bogoyavlenka, and the Russians are moving further. Furthermore, the Russians managed to add additional roads of attack, and now the Russians are doing everything they can to get as close as possible to the village of Velyka Novosilka. At least this information was stated and reported by different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian one, and according to neutral mappers. As you can see, according to this post, according to this picture, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, and currently the distance between the first buildings and the farms in the southeastern part of Velyka Novosilka and possible edge Russian positions is already less than 4 kilometers. Obviously, the Russians have already established complete artillery control over this settlement, and the Russians are moving further. As for pro-Ukrainian mappers, they are saying that currently the Russians are trying to advance from the villages of Shakhtarskaya and Yasnaya Polyana in the direction of Razdolne. The Russians need to improve their positions and at least to reach this line with the purpose to establish complete fire control over the road that goes from the mainland in the direction of this Velyka Novosilka agglomeration. Furthermore, we need to understand one important thing, that every single Ukrainian position that the Russians are attacking right now is located in the lowlands. As for the Russian positions that the Russians are using to attack, these positions are located on the elevations, which means that Ukrainians have no benefits in fighting with the Russians, and the Russians see everything in front of them as they can see everything on their hands. So now let's compare the map of how the situation was developing on the line between Velyka Novosilka, Zolotaya Niva, and Shakhtarskaya. This is the situation by the end of the 5th of November, and this is the situation at the beginning of the 6th of November. As you can see, the progress is significant. Furthermore, we expect that these upcoming days, the Russians should begin another offensive operation on the line between the villages of Livadne, Perytino, Novodarievka, Novopolzelyone Polye, and the Russians may try to attack on the line Staromayorska, Rovnopol, Novosilka. If the Russians are able to take these positions and these villages under complete control, this will lead to complete collapse of the South Donetsk direction, and this will allow the Russians in the very near future to enter the Dnipropetrovsk region, which is a completely different place, completely different direction. So let's wait. Obviously, we are facing decisive days for the Ukrainians in the South Donetsk direction, and very soon everything can completely collapse, and then we don't understand where exactly the Ukrainians are able to stop the Russians. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Sukhyi Yaly River foothold. This is the river, and these are the number of settlements that are under complete Ukrainian control. And according to pro-Russian sources and neutral mappers, the situation is worsening. For example, neutral mappers reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to maintain the lines between the villages of Maximovka and Trudova, and these fields and positions among these fields were captured by the Russians. Just yesterday, we were watching this video of how the Russians conducted another landing operation with the use just of one personnel carrier, and as you can see, this is very weird. Ukrainians don't have enough of forces, don't have enough of power to stop just a single personnel carrier that goes in the direction of Ukrainian positions, which means that the situation is very critical, and we see that Ukrainians do have problems with FPV drones and with artillery. In this video, the Russians landed in this part, and we have colored this territory in Russian favor. As for today, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions even more and much significantly. So, furthermore, we continue receiving updates from the line between the villages of Trudova and Uspenovka. As for this territory, we have no proofs that the Russians managed to enter both the village of Trudova or to reach the outskirts of Uspenovka. But as for some pro-Russian resources, during the and pro-Ukrainian resources as well, we've been receiving for the previous 5 or 4 days that the clashes are already taking place on the territory of Uspenovka. The Russians are trying to break through the defense belt to take under control over this stronghold and to collapse and to defeat the Ukrainians in this area completely. If the Russians are able to take this stronghold under complete control, this will lead to the creation of several cauldrons for the Ukrainians in this direction. So this is going to be the first cauldron that the Russians may try to establish for the Ukrainians during the next several days. This might be the second cauldron for the Ukrainians, and of course the third cauldron is the village of the town of Velyka Novosilka itself. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Kurakhove. We have a lot of updates. According to information we have, the Russians managed to take under control the railway station Roy during the previous 12 hours. A very interesting update, because the first reports that the Russians entered the village of Roy we received somewhere in the beginning of November. So let's take a look at the updates since the beginning of January. No, it was published most likely somewhere in the end of October. So it's, yes, since the 27th, on the 30th of October, we got the first report that the Russians entered the railway station of Roy. But most likely since that first attempt, there were very heavy clashes, and maybe the Ukrainians managed to restore control of this territory and to force the Russians to fall back. And today, on the 6th of November, we got the second report that the Russians managed to secure this territory completely. Of course, we are waiting for geolocations for some videos to adjust the map, but if this information is correct, then we see that the situation is started developing much faster than it was expected. Furthermore, we have report that the Russians managed to take under control the village of Velyka, or the Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Velyka and to answer the village of Berestki. At least about this information, several pro-Russian sources reported. The Russian army entered the settlement of Berestki in the Kurakhove direction. We haven't received anything about Ilinka, so there are very high chances that the Russians managed to encircle the Ukrainian garrison on the territory of this small village. As for now, we are waiting also for additional updates and additional maybe some map changes from different reliable mappers. And now let's talk about the west of Tsukurin-Selidova line. And during the previous 24 hours, during the previous nights, we haven't received almost anything, just a regular activity. After the Russians managed to improve their positions in this direction, the Russians began regrouping, and the Ukrainians brought additional reinforcements and reserves, trying to slow the Russians down. Most likely, after this batch of reinforcement destroyed, the Russians will continue moving further in the western direction. Now let's talk about the city of Toretsk, because as for this direction, the situation is not developing in Russian favor. We can say that the situation currently in this direction is something like 50-50. According to the latest updates, we see that the Ukrainians managed to bring reinforcements and reserves, and the arrived reinforcements and reserves is enough to stop and to slow down the Russians. Furthermore, at some places, at some points, the Ukrainians managed to counterattack and to restore some positions. For example, this concerns the northwestern part of Druzhba. So this is the situation on the ground on the 6th of November, and this is the situation on the 5th of November. As you can see, according to different mappers, the Ukrainians managed to counterattack and to restore some positions, at least in the northwestern part of this settlement. Furthermore, we have another video that was published by Ukrainian soldiers, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainian soldiers were moving in the city of Tarskoe from one point to another. So something is happening here, and once again, most likely the situation in Toretsk stopped developing in Russian favor, and currently the situation here either 50-50 or develops in Ukrainian favor. Now let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar. The Russians continue offensive operation. Currently, almost nobody is talking about how the situation is developing here, but according to geolocations and according to reports we are receiving, currently there are very heavy clashes, and the Russians have already started storming of the central citadel. And the most important, that according to the latest updates, we see that the snow is already on the surface of the city. So the snow has come to Chasiv Yar. And now we understand which videos are fresh and which of the videos are old one. Now let's move to the serious direction, because the story of Russian offensive in the direction of Avdiivka didn't stop yesterday. Today we got another batch of videos of how the Russians were attacking the same settlement, but this time the Russians were attacking from the east. And the Russians also were using the significant number of armored vehicles and tanks. And according to the video that was published by the 54th Motor Rifle Brigade, the Russian attack was stopped and from this direction. Now we understand the full picture. The Russians were attacking the settlement of Avdiivka and the stronghold to the northwest of this small village from two directions. The Russians were attacking from the south on the line Berestovo-Avdiivka, trying to break through the Ukraine defense belt, and the second attack was taking place from the Lysychansk oil refinery, Verkhnyi Kamenka, in the direction of the same place. Both attacks most likely were repelled by the Ukrainians. Of course, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. The eastern flank was adjusted today, and this information was also confirmed by neutral mappers, and the southern part was adjusted yesterday, according to the video that was published by the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade. But once again, if the Russians don't take control over the stronghold, over the company's stronghold to the northwest of Avdiivka, we're talking about this place, then the Russians have no chances to hold their lines in the recently gained territories, and sooner or later the Russians would be forced to fall back. So now we are waiting for more videos from this stronghold. If the Russians can do this, then they will be able to gain strong positions, and after that they will be able to think what to do next, how to attack the villages of Verkhnyi Kamenska, Novosilka, and Siversk. As for now, the Siversk citadel is the strongest stronghold ever since the beginning of the special military operation. It's the most difficult direction for the armed forces of Russian Federation. Now let's talk about the north in Kupiansk and the south in Kupiansk direction. We haven't received anything special. As for the Kharkiv direction, we got some articles from the city of Vovchansk. And according to information we have, the battle for Vovchansk is already went through the 6 months of length. So very long battle, probably one of the longest battle in this stage of the special military operation. And now we understand that neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians managed to take the initiative in their hands. And now it's very difficult to understand what is going to be in the near future. But obviously, if Donald Trump is not able to stop the war, the city of Avchansk will be completely turned into the village of Marinka. So it will be reduced to ruins, and it's going to be very difficult and very long clashes. As for the Suji direction, Zelensky recently stated that the first battle between Koreans and the Russians were spotted on the territory of this region, but without any video proofs. So let's wait for some more days. Maybe the Ukrainians will provide us necessary information, and maybe the Ukrainians will provide this information to the NATO and the Western countries, trying to force them to lift any restrictions. Furthermore, today we got very important information from pro-Ukrainian reliable resources that the Ukrainians are planning to make a big problem for the Western countries. Some sources are saying that during the next several months or several weeks, the Ukrainians will allow the Russians to conduct a breakthrough in the direction of Dnipro and the Zaporozhye region. And according to Ukrainians, this will force the Western countries, this will force Donald Trump and Joe Biden to be involved in the conflict as soon as possible, trying to provide as many as possible military assistance with the purpose to stop the Russians and slow them down. So as for now, Zelensky came to this conclusion that the only way how the Ukraine can force Western countries to intensify their activity is to start losing. If you remember, during the previous few months, we were talking a lot about the blackmail with the capitulation. Now, Zelensky, as I understand, is going to make his first step. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes to my Patreon and have a good day. Bye bye.